they were in the shop, in the production line, whether they were the salespeople, they were working hard. But their sales continued to fall off. They saw their company eroding. And it was like, but we are working hard. But they weren't meeting the needs of their clientele anymore. Now, Eastman Kodak is actually still a company. And they still do, they also not only did digital and still photography, not digital, I'm sorry, movie and still photography. They also had to do with paper and chemicals, and that was actually one of the areas that they extended. But they did not look at learning to meet the needs, and they didn't look at what was new. How many of you have heard of the company Apple? Okay, different case scenario. Now, Apple just came out with their i5, or whatever they're calling it. When they were, and I'm going to go back and talk about the i4 and the 4S. When Steve Jobs presented the 4S, which was his last presentation where he talked about that, what do you think was going on at his office while he was talking about the 4S? They were developing the 5. They were the leader, and they are the leader in smartphones, but they are never satisfied with where they are. They are saying, you know, we're the best. Good job, what are we doing next? How can we be better? They are an organization that continually looks, not necessarily to reinvent themselves, but to explore the area that they are good, and if somebody comes out with something that's a little different, that is where they reinvent. They continually learn, and they make changes. They are never satisfied with the status quo. When we think about accountability nowadays, that's something, a position that we have been put in. You cannot be satisfied with we're the best school. You know, you may have been in the highest performing school, but that's no longer sufficient. Because if you are the highest performing school and you are not moving forward, then that's not sufficient. So that does present some dilemmas, because you know it can be a little discouraging that when you're doing well and yet we're not satisfied with that. But what's happened with accountability, whether we like it or not, is that the schools that have been challenged to do better, our high-performing schools, have done better. They have increased. So whereas those schools that were at, you know, 110, 115 when they started, and they were thinking 120, and then they started thinking 140, you know, they're at 135. They went past that 120. Had we said, you know, you're the top, you don't need to worry about it, they would have stayed where they were. So it's a matter of how do you continue to learn, to improve, how do you look at your strengths first before you look at your areas of need. Because we need to rely on our strengths if we want to look at our areas of need. So when we think about Eastman Kodak, and I already kind of answered this question for you, in terms of how is it similar to us, in terms of what's happening with it, and it's the whole relationship to accountability, that we have to make sure we are meeting the needs of the current market. And the current market, whether it's in the way of policymakers telling us to do things, and you know,